House Oversight Subcommittee held a hearing on UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena, this week, and heard testimony about object sightings and government possession of non-human material. One notable moment from the hearing was when whistleblower David Grush said the United States government is absolutely in possession of UAPs.
Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General.
Grush also answered to the government finding non-human biologics along with crashed craft. Let's watch.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human.
Investigative journalist and author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record, Leslie Kean joins us now to discuss. Thanks for being with us, Leslie.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of that claim by Grush there of the non-human biologics?
Well, I mean, that is the most, probably the most explosive statement that was made in the whole hearing in terms of just trying to wrap your mind around something that hard to imagine, that there's actually biological material, if not bodies of non-human beings in the possession of the U.S. government. I have no way of knowing whether that's true or not. I have talked to others who have told me that it is true, but I think tracking down the crash retrieved objects, we may have a better chance of doing that than getting our hands on biological specimens. So I'm not in a position to know.
David Grush also said during his testimony that he has gathered this evidence from 40 people that he's interviewed. Do we have a sense of who these individuals are and whether or not how many of them actually had firsthand knowledge or direct access to the craft or biologics that were recovered?
We don't know who the specific individuals were, although there may have been some that have come forward, and whether they're part of that pool of 40, we don't really know. For instance, we had a couple of people in our story in the debrief that were supporting David Grush's testimony, but most of them, I believe, are not comfortable coming forward publicly because they don't feel safe. There's lots of restrictions on what people can do and say. They don't want to break their security oaths, or they may be uncomfortable that it might threaten their jobs or their careers in some way. They're afraid of retaliation, which is what happened to David Grush. So people are kind of waiting in the wings, I think, to see how things unfold. And then I think more and more will come public in support of him. And we will hear from people who have direct firsthand knowledge of these programs, which Grush didn't have.
So it sounds like there is a bit of breaking news today moving out of this about the subcommittee coming from McCarthy. Can you tell us a little bit about what you know about the subcommittee?
Yes, I did. I just heard from Burchett's office that the four members of the committee, the Appropriations Committee, who held the hearing, have written a letter to Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The four members are Mr. Burchett, Matt Gaetz, Luna, and Jared Moskowitz. And they have asked him for the formation of a select committee to investigate UAP. It would also involve the collection of information, and it would, conduct oversight, the issues around oversight that need to be addressed. And what's really important, I think, about this select committee is that it would have subpoena authority, so that this committee would be in position to subpoena some of the witnesses that we all want to hear from, and or documents that maybe could be declassified for the public, because they've also focused on the problem of overclassification. They want to release more documents to the public. So it's a very exciting development, and I hope that it happens.
And I understand you were at this hearing earlier in the week, Leslie. What was the mood like in the room? Did people seem to be taking this seriously? Were people kind of brushing it off or joking about it? And not just among congressional members, but the other people in the audience. How did they seem to react to some of this information that was coming out?
Yeah, the mood, Amber, was really just sort of joyful and, everybody on high alert, everybody very excited. There were literally hundreds of people who lined up to get into this hearing, members of the public who could not get in because there just wasn't space. People started lining up at 2 a.m. in the morning, hours and hours and hours, stayed up all night to try to get in. So, the mood, I did not get a sense of any disparaging or ridiculing or any kind of attitudes like that. It was very serious and very excited.
So we've seen a few viral moments that have gotten the most attention online. What happened in the hearing that you would point to that's worthy of attention that's not getting attention?
Well, that's a good question, because I do think some of the more, sensationalistic aspects of it are getting most of the attention. But there were a lot of other important points that were brought out. One of them, for instance, a need for pilots to report, to have a mechanism in which they can feel safe reporting. Ryan Graves mentioned that only 95% of that 95% of the pilots who do have sightings don't report them. I mean, that is a huge number. So something needs to be done to address that, because there's valuable data to be provided from these pilots, which isn't getting provided because they're afraid that they'll somehow harm their jobs, or that they'll be ridiculed, or there's still a stigma against this. So that needs to be addressed. There was also a point brought up about satellite imagery. There must be a tremendous amount of satellite imagery. I'm sure some of the classified briefings have included it. Can some of that be brought up? There's issues around government oversight that need to be addressed. So there's, a lot, and there needs to be basically an investigation to follow up on what David Grush has provided, the specifics, because he did say that he has provided names, locations, program names, all the data that the members need in order to follow up on what he's telling them. So that was a major point, that an investigation needs to take place to find out if what he's saying is true.
Former Navy Commander David Fravor also delivered a glowing account of the speed with which the craft he encountered moved. Let's take a look.
The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave. And there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
Fravor added that the Pentagon never investigated the incident. What do you make of this, Leslie?
Yeah, I mean, the incident took place in 2004, and that was before the program was set up by the DIA in 2007 that was to address some of these phenomena, including UFOs. And then the ATIP program carried on inside the Department of Defense. So they did a kind of retroactive investigation of this case back in the early days of the ATIP program. So, but it wasn't, in those days, these kinds of things were never brought forward. People were afraid to talk about them. And so fortunately, they did do this retroactive investigation. There's a long document that was put together by the investigative team about this case. There were multiple witnesses to it. It's very, very powerful, and there's a lot of data. So now I think we're going to see much more open investigation. If an incident like this were to happen today, I think it would be more public from the beginning, and hopefully more data would be shared with the public as the investigation was undertaken.
It's interesting you point to that sort of a shift in how freely we share information about UFOs, UAPs now. Throughout your career, you've worked through this shift in sentiments about sharing information about UAPs and UFOs with the public. What would you credit this change in how we handle the information to?
Well, I would credit it to the whole kind of trajectory that began in 2017 with the New York Times story that I helped write. And it kind of opened the doors for this to be allowed to be taken seriously, because the story revealed that there was a secret program in the Department of Defense that was studying this. And that led the members of Congress to become interested and to receive all kinds of briefings about this. And so it just kind of built on that and built on that. When you have members of government engaged with this topic, seriously interested in it, talking about it as a national security issue, alluding to the fact that it may not be may not be human, we're dealing with something extraordinary here, that the stigma starts to fade away. You need highly credible authorities to engage with this for that stigma to drop. And so I think that's really what's changed it. Prior to 2017, the government wouldn't even comment on this. They were absolutely unengaged. But that has changed so radically that we're seeing a diminishment in that stigma pretty quickly.
What do we know about the involvement of other countries' governments in the exploration of UAPs? Is there cooperation there between the United States and some of their global partners to basically investigate whether or not these craft are simply technological explorations by geopolitical enemies versus actually being extra normal phenomena?
Yes, I mean, as far as I know, our government does cooperate with our allies on this, especially within the group called the Five Eyes. We work with the UK closely, Australia, but of course we don't know a lot about what our adversaries know. Of course, we're not working with them, and the big question is around China and Russia and what kind of technology they may possess as a result of any kind of reverse engineering programs they have. So we're always trying to find out more about what they know. But yes, there is cooperation. I think it's done very privately and quietly between the different countries. But I do know that it does take place.
Leslie, thank you so much for joining us and breaking this down today.
Thank you very much for having me.
More Rising after this.